ሐሳብ ገበታ ሐሳብ ያለ ልዩነት ሚዛናዊነት እንዲሁም በአሳታፊነት የሚንሸራሸርበት ቤት። በሐሳብ ገበታችን ወቅታዊ፣ ማህበራዊ፣ ፖለቲካዊ እንዲሁም የህግ ጉዳዮች በስፋት በጥልቀትና በአካታችነት ይቀርባሉ። የሳምንቱ እንግዳም የሳምንቱ በተጋባዥ የማህበረሰብ አንቂዎች፣ ፖለቲከኞች እንዲሁም ሙያተኞች የሚቀርቡበት ፕሮግራም ወቅታዊ ጉዳይ፣ ወቅታዊ ሀገራዊ ጉዳዮች የሚዳሰሱበት ዝግጅት፣ የውይይትና የክርክር መድረክ፣ በተለያየ ጎራ የሚገኙ ታላላቅ ፖለቲከኞች፣ የማህበረሰብ አንቂዎች እንዲሁም ሙያተኞች በሐሳብ ዙሪያ ፊት ለፊት የሚወያዩበት ከዛም አልፎ የሚሟገቱበት ፕሮግራም፣ ህዝባዊ መድረክ፣ በተለያዩ ጉዳዮች ላይ ሁሉም የሐሳብ ገበታ ቤተሰቦች በቀጥታ ሐሳባቸውን የሚያቀርቡበትና ተሳታፊ የሚሆኑበት ለቤተሰቦቻችን እድል የምንሰጥበት ጊዜም። እነዚህና ሌሎች ሳምንታዊ ፕሮግራሞችን ለእናንተ እናቀርባለን። ይህንን የተወደደ ቻናል ሰብስክራይብ በማድረግ ቤተሰብ ይሁኑ፣ በስፋት ተደራሽ እንዲሁም ለሌሎች ያጋሩም። የሐሳብ ገበታው እንዲጠናከር በተሻለ ጥራትና ስፋት ወደ እናንተ እንዲደርስ በሐሳቦ በሙያውና በገንዘቡ ይደግፉን። የሐሳብ ገበታን በሱፐር ቻት፣ በሱፐር ታንክስና በሱፐር ስቲከር አጋርነቱን ያሳዩን። በጎፈንድሚ አማራጭ የሐሳብ ገበታን ያበረታቱ። ስለ ሐሳብ አስተያየቶ እንዲሁም ድጋፎም እናመሰግናለን። ዓላማችን የሐሳብ ማህበረሰብ መፍጠር ነው። የሐሳብ ገበታም
Good morning, good afternoon, hello there. This is our Ethiopia Today podcast. Today I will be talking to our guest, Mr. Mandefro, who is a PhD candidate, as well as he is the Director of Advocacy at AAA, or Amhara Association in America. We had a discussion before, and this will be in English, and we are hoping to convey our message to the wider international community, as well as those people who are interested in what is going on in the Amhara region in general, and the advocacy of the Amhara pains, suffering, and causes. Mr. Hona, it's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mogas. Pleasure to be talking to you again.
All right. Today we'll address generally the politics, advocacy, and diplomacy in relation to what has been happening in the Amhara region, as well as against Amhara people. I would like to start off with updating us, if you can, what is happening in Ethiopia, and who is fighting whom, and what is the current state of the Amhara movement.
Thank you for that question, Mogas. I think for most people, they would know that there has been a full-blown war in Amhara region for a couple of years now. First, as part of the war in northern Ethiopia that included Tigray, Amhara, and Afar. But then, following the agreement in Pretoria, the Prosperity Party and TPLF have formed an alliance, and the bullet has been the guns have been turned against Amharas, and particularly since the declaration of the state of emergency by the federal parliament last August, there has been an intensified war in Amhara region that has been going on, with different intensity. At the moment, just a couple of weeks, there is a trend of intensifying fighting in a number of areas in Amhara region. I think this has to do with the fact that it's summer, and the Fano forces have always said that the summer is their favorite period to do operations against the federal or the Abiy regime, because they would have an advantage in terms of knowing the area, where to go, and how to maneuver the deployment of their forces vis-a-vis the enemy. So there seems to be an intensified fighting initiated by the Fanos in the past 2 weeks to try to weaken the Abiy region forces before the end of the summer, which we expect the region would start to heavily deploy forces such as air force and drones. So using the advantage of summer, I think the Fano forces have pushed government forces in a number of areas, like in Gondar in particular. They pushed out the region forces from several areas in central Gondar and in South Gondar as well. In Gojam, similar areas, such as Kwarit and other areas, they recaptured those areas they have lost a couple of months ago. In Shua, there is an intensified fighting in a number of areas, and similarly in Warlow, there has always been fighting and changing of positions in terms of who controls which area, but lately there seems to be the Fanos taking up a number of places under their control. So I guess the broader trend is, yes, there has been an intensified fighting that is, that has implicated the region forces in a number of human rights violations across the region. But if we're thinking of the past couple of weeks, this seems to be an intensive effort by the Fano side to push out region forces as much as they can, taking advantage of the weather the summer is affording them.
That's great. Thank you for the update. Just staying on that point, based on your statement, is it safe to say that the tides are changing in favor of Fano over the last few weeks?
I think we could say that for the broader conflict. If you remember, when the state of emergency was declared by the federal government, it was initially for 6 months, and the region forces were bragging that they would crush the Fano forces in a couple of weeks, and they would bring normalcy into the region. They would arrest or otherwise kill the major Fano leaders. They have been doing the same kind of campaign again and again. But a year later, what we see is Amhara region is still heavily under the Fano control. The Fanos claim they have control between 60 to 80% of any of the zones in the region. But regardless of the percentages, the bigger point, the bigger image or picture is almost pretty much every rural district is under Fano control, or the Fanos are freely mounting or conducting operations without any significant deterrence from the region forces. And also the Fanos are bringing their fighting to major cities such as Bardar, which we have seen last week. There was a confrontation in Dase, in Waldia, in Debre Tabor. So this ensures that, shows that the Fanos can conduct operation anywhere virtually in the region, and the regional nominal administration is in any way not controlling any area effectively. So in that sense, the Fanos have achieved unprecedented level of success, quite frankly, way more than anyone expected. Those have within Amhara, but also more broadly in the Ethiopian analysts or those who have been following Ethiopia didn't expect this level of success among the Fanos, to the extent that within a couple of weeks they kind of dismantled the ruling Amhara Prosperity Party and continue to control a significant part of the region. So the tide, in a sense, has always been in favor of the Fanos if we are thinking of control within the region. But in terms of the bigger image of pushing the region out of power, that's a little bit complicated, partly because the Fanos, while they do have undoubtedly larger support within the Amhara movement, there are limitations still in terms of bringing a wider coalition that can substitute the Abiy regime. So what is, in my view, why the Abiy regime is in power still in Ethiopia is because of the political complications in Ethiopian political landscape, not for its military power. I think, within Addis Ababa, there has been operations by the Fanos and all that. That all shows that, how the regime is vulnerable. And internally, there is a lot of leaking of information to the Fanos, but also to everybody else. So that's also, this is a regime that has hardly been, coercive and can be deposed quite easily. But, the political challenge is what is the alternative, and how do you bring that when we think of the broader dynamics within Ethiopia?
Then you also mentioned that the Fano is fighting the enemy, and of course you're referring to the military engagement, but at strategic level, who is Amhara people's enemy? Does the Amhara people have any enemy in this regard, and who are the enemies you are fighting against?
Well, obviously, if there are armed conflicts, there are enemies. And I think, but in any way, those enemies will not be a group of people. And I think that we have to make quite clear. Amhara people live across Ethiopia and have, as a people, good relationship with virtually all Ethiopians. But over the last couple of decades, they have been targets of state-led genocide. And this started, way back in the 1970s and 1980s with what is now referred as the Ethiopian student movement, which, in my view, was a group of students trying to bring modernity to Ethiopia in their own definition. But as part of that effort to modernize Ethiopia, they adopted a Marxist system, and they were looking for a privileged group to scapegoat, as you would require in a Marxist analysis. Unfortunately, despite pointing out, a number of issues with feudalism and class issues, that conversation degenerated into hateful rhetoric against Amharas, and that led into, nationalist movements who identified collectively Amharas as enemies and wanted to subjugate them. And that initially, led into, the Derg essentially going after Amharas and killing of a number of Amharas living in Aris and other places across different parts of Ethiopia, as being associated with, the old regime. But then it kind of got intensified after TPLF came to power, because TPLF made front and center, ethnicity as a way of mediating a relationship between state and society. And the Amhara is defined as an ethnic category that does not deserve status protection, status resources.
But is that foregrounded in any existing structures, or is it just some kind of practices and background knowledge which defines and redefines the Ethiopian political landscape and policies?
No, that's what I was going. Actually, what the student movement kind of might have scapegoats Amharas, but the TPLF is the one that cemented this narrative into institutional features, be it from the constitution to how regions were divided, and how Amharas that live across Ethiopia were minoritized. They were not minority numerically, but they were minoritized politically because they were denied of representation and voice. And that led into normalization of massacres and killing of Amharas across Ethiopia. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is our enemy is the structure that TPLF implemented, and that kind of denies us our existence within our own country, that denies us our rights, our livelihoods within the country. And the broader fight of Amhara movement, including the Fanot, is a restoration, a fight to restore the dignity of Amhara people, individually, but also collectively. And that would entail, obviously, making a major restructuring in terms of the structure of the state and how the state views and depicts and relates with the Amhara people. And that continues to be a bigger objective that transcends or is way bigger than toppling the Abiy administration or TPLF. Look, the Amharas fought to topple TPLF, and they succeeded. But their problems didn't go away. In fact, since Abiy came to power, they were intensified. And the reason is because Abiy inherited and cemented this anti-Amhara structure that was put in place in the early 1990s. And ultimately, the goal is to change this not just for the sake of Amharas, but I think more broadly, there are several Ethiopians that are denied of voice, that have been victimized by this ethnic apartheid system the country is at the moment. So,
thanks so much. So you are in a sense saying that there are structural violences against Amhara people, and the ultimate end game of the Amhara struggle is to change that structural relationship and restore the dignity of the Amhara people, if I understood you well.
Definitely.
So let's move on to the media coverage, which is very important, and it is mind-boggling to see that the same incident is happening in the same country, namely in Ethiopia, under the same regime, is not being reported in the same way and with the intensity and of course priority that it deserves. Some people say that the ongoing Amhara struggle, as well as the war, is not being covered by both the national and international media, as well as there is no strong solidarity being shown towards the Amhara people. Do you agree with that? If that is the case, what do you think explains this dismal affair?
I do agree, while the Amhara people have over the last few years in particular picked up a number of allies that are, trying to help the Amhara have voice compared to the atrocities on the ground. The suffering of the Amhara people haven't got the attention it deserves. And I think partly it is a reflection of the state of Amhara institutions. We have not been, organizing as an Amhara for long. I think it's a recent development. Although the idea of, Amharas are under threat is a long-standing one, including during the Derg regime. The project of creating institutions for Amharas so that they can speak for themselves is quite recent, and because of that, we don't have that many strong institutions that can push and hold a number of powerful actors accountable, and be it within Ethiopia or abroad. But also, I think I do have, resentment against some influential people that are commentators on Ethiopia. For a long time, they have been part of the problem when it comes to Amhara people. They were, portraying Amharas as always perpetrators and never as victims. They refuse to recognize Amhara as a victim, and that is because of the theoretical or the broader paradigm that I mentioned earlier. This hegemonic thinking, reading of Ethiopia's history, Ethiopia's affairs within the tradition of this nationalities, and the need to have one group to stand as a placeholder for a kind of a privileged group, meant that many of the media commentators kind of refused to recognize Amharas, primarily because they would then be struggling to explain their what the country is going through. Like the whole scholarship is built on demonizing Amharas, and the moment if they have to recognize Amhara as a victim, then they would be in a way contradicting themselves. So for the sake of their consistency, they refused to engage in any conversation that recognizes Amharas as a victim. And that these individual scholars have a role in terms of dictating what goes into policy circles when it comes to Ethiopia, and who gets to be invited into particularly powerful media houses that determine or decide on narratives about Ethiopia. And because of that, even knowing the fact that there is an ongoing effort to suppress the voice of Amharas, to make sure we are not invited to a number of platforms where we could educate policymakers and non-Ethiopians about the affairs within Ethiopia, just because this old guard set of scholars have to maintain a sort of authority and also credibility by hiding the pain of Amharas. I think that played a role. But among Ethiopians, this powerful paradigm also has become, a go-to way of doing politics in Ethiopia, as you alluded recently in one of your clips. Among the beginner politician in Ethiopia, the classical move is to present oneself and as a left wingist, as a liberator, and then insult Amharas and Amhara politicians. And our politics has not only degenerated into sort of excesses of insults, but at the same time, particularly when it comes to Amharas, what TPLF and EPRDF and now Prosperity Party are doing is, normalizing, insulting Amharas and genocidal rhetoric against Amharas as a legitimate form of political discourse in Ethiopia. And that has limited the willingness of people to empathize with Amharas, to listen to their pain, and to attend to what's happening in Ethiopia. In a way, we are still treated in a stereotypical way rather than being listened to and presented in an empirically objective way. And therefore, we're victims of narrative and stereotypes, and that has led into, particularly within the elite and the political class, a refusal to empathize for Amharas, even when they know, the reality on the ground is that several Amharas are killed every day and for nothing but their identity. So that has contributed to lack of coverage, but I think we also have to take a blame as Amhara collective. We have not been astute in terms of targeting key policymakers and pushing back. We were not, strong. We were not determined enough to push the doors that are closed on us and find a way to kind of be part of conversations about Ethiopia.
Thank you. So that's a very interesting way of seeing the problem. So I just want to stress on the last point that you have made. So how much of the problem could be explained in terms of a self-inflicted injury? Just if you can elaborate a little bit on that. And if you give us some examples or manifestations of the problem when it comes to internal weakness and a lack of mobilization and strategic communications.
I think a key challenge the movement is struggling at the moment is, those who are highly educated can have a capacity to enter in a meaningful and impactful conversation, taking and serving as agency of Amhara people, are not in the movement. This has to do partly, with the leftist tradition. Some Amharas were trying to be, present themselves as champions of some leftist ideas, and they felt like they have to betray their identity and the interest of their Amhara population to be accepted by the community of influencers on Ethiopia, and therefore they went on to talk about other things and refused to engage about Amhara affairs. So that is, I think, a scenario where you have highly educated Amharas but still not engaged in terms of talking about what's happening to Amharas. So that has to be reversed, and that continues to be a challenge. It has to do with cultural issue back in 1970s and 1980s. You have to appear, a radical socialist with red books and alleging to, or staying above your own ethnicity and all that. But I think in the moment, there is also an element of costs for doing that. The policy circle, the media circle, when it comes to Ethiopia, is a small one, and some people don't want to take a risk of pushing back against established voices and lose opportunities, be that job opportunities, publishing opportunities, invitations to influential conversations, and all that. There is a tendency to quickly corner anyone who pushes back against this established hegemony that's anti-Amhara and anti really Ethiopian, honestly. So in that sense, yes, there are a number of weaknesses we have to overcome. But also, I think, because of the new nature of our movement, we haven't established strong institutions yet. Those institutions that are required to have internal conversation, internal debates, and even resolving conflicts, we are not yet there. So we are struggling to create institutions. I mean, AAA is an example of an institution, but we're not even 10 years old. We're quite new. Whereas if you see other ethnic groups, they have institutions that have been there for more than half a century. And that institutional capacity is important in terms of creating ideological clarity, in terms of having conversations, in terms of resolving conflicts internally, or preventing fallouts and all that. So this lack of institutions, strong institutions, I think continues to be an issue. But that is not unique to Amhara movement. It is a challenge for any new movement, and I think it would be a problem if we don't have any progress on this, in the coming years. But for now, I think the bigger image is, even with this new institutions that are, quite new, we have been successful. We've been successful in achieving a lot within a short period of time, be it in terms of the situation on the ground, but also relatively bringing, turning the attention on Amharas more broadly.
That was the issue I'm about to mention. So let's see it in a kind of evolutionary movement, or the trajectory of the Amhara struggle and advocacy. So if let's take 5 years, over the last 5-6 years, do you think that the situation has been changed significantly? And if so, what is the role of your organization or youth association, the AAA, in this regard? I'm referring to the advocacy front.
Yeah, definitely. A lot has changed in the past 5 years. Look, 5 years ago, let alone, an armed struggle on the ground trying to end the genocide, saying I am an Amhara was a taboo for many people. That is a long gone time now. Within the 5 years, not only Amharas have become, proud and embraced their identity, but they are joining Amhara institutions all over the world. Within the diaspora itself, when AAA was established in 2017, 2016, it was one of the few Amhara organizations. Right now, there are dozens just in America alone, and there are several dozens all over the world. And within Ethiopia, we have seen the emergence of student associations, youth associations, and even a political party. However, the trajectory that party has taken is open for discussion. And there is a fact that there was an Amhara political party taking and organizing Amharas is quite a success. And AAA, as one of the first established organizations, have played a role in many ways in kind of helping these organizations to emerge, but also continuously work with them in terms of developing their capacity. And if you remember, one of our leaders, the chairperson of AAA, Tedestrofe, was he testified in front of Congress, and then since then, a number of organizations have invited him all over the world to speak at their events, and we have established a number of departments within our own institution. 5 years ago, we were complaining about the lack of human rights reporting on human rights violations against Amharas. Now we take on that role. We're doing something by producing reports ourselves, not just text-based reports, but documentaries. If you take, We're Still Breathing, a documentary Tripoli produced a year ago, that was produced by Graham Beals, a UK-based, a professional, and it has won so far 5 awards for telling the story of the people in an effective way. And we're moving more in terms of pressing charges against the federal government, like for instance in the African Union Commission for Peoples and Human Rights, we have an ongoing communication where we are, asking the Commission to force the Ethiopian regime to end its role in the ongoing genocide in Amhara region. That has been seized, and now we're working on merit, and the Ethiopian government is working on. We are aware that the Ethiopian government is working on a response to the file we submitted, establishing a task force. So that shows you, the multiple directions we're taking our advocacy, not just, helping other organizations to emerge, but our own organization taking on the role of educating the community through the media, through these reports, through audiovisual documentaries, but also, pressing for, platforms where we can call out and pressure the Ethiopian regime for its role in the ongoing Amhara genocide. So yeah, everywhere you go now, Amharas are organizing, they are establishing associations, they are establishing support groups, they are talking to their colleagues in Ethiopia on a daily basis. Pretty much every diaspora member I know every day is engaging with people in Ethiopia to learn what's happening, to ask what role they have in making sure, the movement is successful. And there are, a number of non-Amharas that are, coming on board as allies, recognizing that, the Amharas have been forgotten for a long time. And some of them, they themselves were wrong in underplaying the suffering of the Amharas, and now try to fix that mistake by playing active role. So not just only Amharas, I think non-Amhara Ethiopians are also coming on board. And there's a momentum, obviously, as reflected on, the situation on the ground. So the things have drastically changed, and I think no one has expected that we would be, where we are in just this short period of time.
All right. Yeah. So you are telling me that there is still room for solidarity and showing sympathy towards the Amhara people. I can also relate to that. So speaking of solidarity and working with others with a view to bring about equality, justice, and ending the suffering of the Amhara people as well as the entire Ethiopian populace, you mentioned that now your Amharaness or being Amhara or Amhara identity is not in question. Even your own identity has evolved over the last 5 years. Then the issue is, how could you synthesize your Amharaness with the Ethiopian state? And because so many people find it very difficult, and you are aware of the ongoing debate about decoupling from the Ethiopian state and or so-called Ethiopianism. So that is quite a challenge. So how could you reconcile, if you will, or synthesize these two identities? Because if you keep on decoupling from Ethiopia, what sets you apart from the other ethno-nationalists?
I think we're not pushing per se against Ethiopia, but we are pushing against the Ethiopian state as we know over the last decades. Amharas have spoken, in a unified and loud voice that we are no longer subject within our own country. We are no longer going to tolerate a state that is going to prosecute us for just who we are, and we're no longer going to be treated as non-citizens within our own country. So we're going to claim our dignity, our rights, but at the same time the state. And therefore, in that sense, we are not pushing against the Ethiopian state. It's an attempt to reclaim our rightful place within the state. That being said, Amharas are not the only people that live across Ethiopia. There are other people who live in Ethiopia, and the relationship among these different groups within the Ethiopian nation state is a subject of discussion, not just for Amharas, but everybody who lives there. And I think that is what is Amharas are saying. There are some groups that want us to endure the suffering that we have seen over the last 3 decades and never question the state or our relationship with the state so that the state can continue unchallenged. And we're saying we're not going to die to let this great genocidal state continue. And I'm talking about the state, the institutions. But that does not mean there is no way to redeem this broken relationship, not just with Amharas, honestly, with other Ethiopians. There is a lot of noise. If you ask an ordinary Ethiopian, no one is happy with the way the state is dealing with them, the way the state is responding to their everyday needs for education, for food, for infrastructure. The problem is over the last 3-4 decades, the relationship between state and society has been heavily defined through the interest of the elites. If we take out of the elites and ask ordinary Ethiopians, I would say there is a lot of solidarity among different ethnic groups than we see among different elites of these different ethnic groups. So in a way, I don't see there is any issue in terms of pushing for redefining the Ethiopian state, how it operates, how it relates with ordinary Ethiopians. And I think there is a lot of unspoken support for Amharas, how they are taking on the state and pushing for reconstituting the state by a number of people from other ethnic groups. But this relationship between Amharas and the Ethiopian state definitely is fundamentally changed. It cannot be undone. We have endured for a long time, and that's no longer the case. Whether the folks in Arakilo like it or not, I don't think you will see the kind of Amhara populace that you have seen over the last 3 decades. The people have spoken. The fact that people are still supporting the Fanos overwhelmingly, even though the regime is killing the civilians to try to intimidate them and to try to increase the cost for this resistance, is an indication that the people have spoken and they're not going to accept the subjugated and very undignified way the Ethiopian state has been treating us for the past 3 decades. So that is changed. But in terms of what the future of Ethiopia looks like, Amharas are going to be part of that conversation. They will have to have their rightful place that they were denied for the past decades, but they are open to listening to other Ethiopians, to listening to what everybody says about what we want to make this future be. We know that future cannot be subjugation for us. That is for sure. But there are a number of things that we could discuss and kind of really brainstorm to come up with a win-win solution for everyone. It does not have to be a zero-sum game as some are portraying it. In fact, the Amhara movement is a movement that is having positive impact on others, inspiring other people to push back against this genocidal regime and ethnic apartheid. And I think that impact will increase as more and more people realize how this normalized view of we have to let ethnic federalism continue unquestioned and regardless of the problems. I think as more people realize how that's problematic, there will be even more look for Amhara movement to provide leadership to redefining a better alternative, not just for Amharas, but for everyone.
Great. You have said that the people have spoken. What a better way to express it. Because the state has never been created for the people. People has never been created for the people, but the state is there to serve the interests of the people. So are you saying in a sense that as opposed to the claim by many people that the Amharas have started disowning the state, but rather you are redefining, in the process of redefining the relationship between the Amhara people and the state, and ultimately redeeming the dignity of the people within that newly minted Ethiopian state, right? Am I right?
Well, look, I think, as I said, the relationship between Ethiopian state and Amharas, that has to be redefined. That we agree. But when it comes to the what shape the Ethiopian state should look like, I think there is a recognition that that is not for Amharas to decide, even if we can. First of all, whether we can or not is a question. But even if we were given the opportunity to do that, it's not fair for the Amharas to decide on any on the broader issue of Ethiopian state, because we're just one group within the larger Ethiopian collective. And what Amharas are saying that we know our interest, we know we're not going to be subjugated. We are willing to have, based on that recognition, we are willing to enter in a productive conversation about the future of the Ethiopian state and what shape, what narrative, what discourse, what kind of ideological framework, what kind of symbols we should build the country on, that we are willing to have a conversation. Because so far, others have not only tried, but effectively redefined Ethiopia at the expense of Amhara's existence. And we are saying that no longer is not going to be the case. So inevitably, there will be a redefining of Ethiopian state. Just because Amharas have risen up and as with the mighty, however, limited that is, you cannot subjugate a population like as big as Amhara for far too long. It's a matter of time they win. And therefore, not only we are open to that conversation, I think others should be ready to have that conversation because it's inevitable. You cannot, the current status quo is not durable. It cannot sustain the country. It cannot be, Amharas cannot injure it. So that conversation is whether we like it or not is going to happen. Look, a few years back, I said that the war in northern Ethiopia is going to redefine Ethiopia. Many people thought this was about, TPLF or Abiy. It wasn't. Back then, I know the Amhara movement is getting into a different phase. I know, people on the ground were determined to pick up arms and pay the ultimate sacrifice to restore the dignity and rights of Amharas. And that kind of period was in a way used strategically by Amharas to build their agency to achieve what they are achieving now on the ground. And therefore, it's not even starting off today. It was ongoing. It was on the making years. And I think people have to be prepared. And there's no way out of that. And Amharas are saying, we're willing to have that conversation with other Ethiopians. But don't expect us to, suffer and
or to lift the heavy weight.
Exactly.
Okay, so I am going to ask you one important question in relation to the advocacy of the AAA. And in the description, you said that, here we go, I think I have to share it. It says that the Amhara Association of America was established with the vision of ending the suffering of Amhara people across Ethiopia by magnifying their voices. So where are you today in this regard?
We have achieved a lot. We haven't got to a stage where we want, and obviously this is a work in progress. But I think we have achieved a lot in terms of magnifying the Amhara's voice. If I can go back to the reason why we started publishing human rights violations, when I joined AAA back in 2018, my first couple of months I spent a lot of hours trying to work with human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, essentially begging them to pay attention to Amharas, asking them to be, willing to speak about the atrocities against Amharas. And I realized that, they're not going to be as responsive as the situation warrants. And we said, look, we cannot, it's always good to have allies, but we cannot depend on others. We have to speak our own stories. We have to tell our own stories. And therefore, we established a team of human rights organization, a team of human rights investigators on the ground in Ethiopia. And we start to produce reporters. And those reporters went on to be cited by, influential outlets, including the magazine, the New York Times, and others. Myself have appeared in a number of media outlets, including, Western media houses. We have been invited to speak in a number of platforms. We are doing advocacy with U.S. government officials, the African Union organizations. We're working with universities such as, the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, where we've organized events with a number of university centers across the world. We have seen Amhara associations in Los Angeles convincing their city council to have a declaration about Amhara genocide. The list goes on. I think it might appear small accomplishment for other groups who have been doing this for decades, but for Amharas who start organizing, a few years, we consider this quite an accomplishment. But we are even more encouraged by the fact that young voices across Ethiopia and in the diaspora are taking the front and the center in Amhara conversation. Within AAA, we take an intentional effort to bring forward young folks, even younger than mine. I think if you take, one of our leaders, communication director, Robel, is younger than me, pretty much.
Quite young, yeah.
Quite young, very well, raised in the diaspora, have been to Ethiopia, but was not privy to the Amhara issues until very recently. And yet, within a few years, he has managed to be, a strong voice for Amharas. I can cite others within our own team, but also in other Amhara organizations. So I think the Amharas have become, aware of the importance of telling their own story and be a voice to their people. And we're seeing this in a number of arenas. One thing we are starting to get into is the academic circle. I think in terms of pushing back against this, narrative that depicted Amharas, a lot of it then was in a form of scholarship. We need to unpack and expose how shallow and problematic that scholarship is. There are a few young scholars publishing on Amhara movement recently, but I don't think we have done enough on that front. And I think that's going to be an important area in the future. But in terms of other areas, it's not yet. We haven't got to a stage where we want or significantly change the dynamics yet. But I think the level of improvement we have seen over the last few years is nothing but something to be proud of.
We will delve into the details of some of the activities you have accomplished, including the upcoming report, very shortly. But before that, one of the contributions of your association is producing periodic reports and investigations, which is quite visible from your website, as I was trying to show recently. But credibility of the report is one of the issue. I am sure that you have come across that accusations. What inbuilt mechanism, quality assurance mechanism have you put in place, and how would you ensure, or have you been able, if there is any, ensure the credibility of your own report?
That is something we pay attention to begin with, from the professional background of the team members. All of our investigators in Ethiopia are human rights lawyers or media professionals, and they have awareness about what human rights are, what constitutes violation, and what are the mechanisms to ensure accountability. So one thing we paid attention is to make sure that this is done by professionals. And we have invested in terms of providing training for these people to the extent of supporting some of them to get regular training by well-established human rights organizations in other countries. And in terms of level, all of them have at least a master's level of education. And so we started with proper, letting it done by professionals. Then, of course, in terms of compiling the data, we have a very rigorous process. It started with how we collect the data. Over the last 5 years, we have worked diligently to establish what we call network of sources. Across Ethiopia, we have people that are assigned to monitor the situation in a certain area and alert us about possible human rights violations. And there is a mechanism, including communication mechanisms, to alert us in a safe way. Once we get an alert, we redirect that alert to our investigators who, if possible, try to go to the reported site of human rights violation to conduct in-person investigations. Oftentimes, this is not safe, and therefore we kind of rely on remote investigations. And those remote investigations are done primarily via internet, but also direct phone calls. This investigation would take a long time. Our investigators would speak with our networks of sources, but at the same time, victims and record this conversation is based on consent, and provide it as a backup if we ever were to be asked to provide evidence for that. But also we have a strong mechanism of editing, reviewing those reports. We have a dedicated team of volunteers in North America primarily, but across the world, where investigators directly send reports to us, and then this educate editors who are themselves are also lawyers or social scientists. They will go through the reports, point out possible discrepancies, and send back those questions to our investigators, and the investigators will finally send us a report. And then we publish reports, two types of reports: initial version, where we pretty much include all information, including sources of the report, where human rights investigators can themselves reach out to sources and the victims and the witnesses to verify our report, but also to conduct their own investigation. And also we provide detailed information. I think one of the key difference of our report compared to other reports is we provide very detailed information about the victims, their information, their names, unless the victim, the atrocity is very, very, culturally stigmatizing, such as, rape or sexual and gender-based violence, in that case, we either anonymize or only include initials of victims. But in other cases, we include names, age, Kabale, which district they are, deaths of, killings or
but do you have the witness and victim protection mechanism once you have already touched up on that issue?
We have a mechanism where we kind of give obviously advice in terms of the risks that might be involved in terms of the witnesses, but which is why I think we produce a second version in addition to the initial version, which is the version you see on the website. It doesn't have the names of witnesses. It doesn't have the names of sometimes the victims, if you feel one is dead or one is injured and and they would be further at the risk of further violation if we include them. We kind of hide that information to ensure that they are not further victimized by inclusion of this report. But we go beyond that. In some cases, we provide support to, especially when witnesses are already at a danger. They ask us to be relocated to elsewhere. So we cover their expenses to relocate them elsewhere, not just because they contribute our report, but for instance, if you know the case of Oromia, they're already in danger. So many people are striving to go out of Oromia. So we kind of support them to leave the area. So those kind of protections we ensure and we provide.
Speaking of Oromia region, one of the hotspot sites of violence is Wolaga, right? Time and again, it has been there are repetitive violence, identity-based violence against Amhara people, and sometimes also against other people. Though there is one of the serious accusation against your association is, I quote, it says that the report usually is based on concocted facts and unfounded claims just to further the sensationalization of their own narratives. And they say at times they even stir up violence so that the report will make into the press. I'm just quoting from some source. So what is your response to this?
When you have structural violence victims like Amharas, there is a structure that is, actively trying to suppress the crimes from being exposed. I think accusations like those are coming from groups who are implicated in the atrocities against Amharas. And for anyone who would like to validate our report, as I said earlier, we identify names of victims. We're not saying this many people, just generically. We are identifying the names of the people, the gender, which area they were killed, on which date. It's very verifiable. And that has been our methodology, because we know this kind of accusations would come from different corners. From the very beginning, we take the importance of providing detailed information that can be verified. For anyone who doubts our reporters, you have the names, you have the information there. Try to falsify the reporters. And I think a number of groups have tried that in the past. We are aware of parallel investigations others have tried to do with an intention of falsifying our reporters, but were unsuccessful, and therefore now are resorting to speculative accusations. But we're not surprised by those accusations, because we know the groups that are implicated in atrocities against Amharas, particularly in Oromia, they have the upper hand in shaping narrative when it comes to Ethiopia, because they've been in this business for far too long, and have white knights who can speak for them with the privilege of white race that comes up with. So I think we know where those accusations are likely to happen, but from the very beginning, we made sure we're not asking you to believe us just because we say, do your own investigation, come up with a report that falsify our investigation. And in that case, we're happy to, if that happens, we're happy to learn. Look, our team in Ethiopia is a professional team. It's separate from our advocacy team in the US. They have all the support and the independence to do investigation based on their profession. And if we find any errors in them, we are willing to take on and mend any mistakes. But so far, no one has proven us our reports to be erroneous or made up. It's just a simple accusation online that we come across repeatedly.
From time to time. Thanks so much. So speaking of different institutions, that with the proliferation of advocacy institutions, or I would say mushrooming of different institutions or advocacy networks, better put, there come the issue of coordination, right? It has become very perennial problem. How have you been coping with the issue of coordination? Are you coordinating with other institutions? Has there been any opportunity or possibility to come together and voice your concern, or at least try to form an umbrella advocacy network whereby it serves as a forum for dialogue and advocacy?
Yes, I think one of the nature of Amhara movement is several organizations kind of mushroomed across the world within a short period of time. And that, while it is primarily and definitely positive, coordination can be challenging. And I think that's why over the last 2 years in particular, our movement focused on consolidating and centralizing institutional mechanisms. And as part of that effort within AAA, our leadership took a lead in terms of bringing associations in North America to form an umbrella organization called Federation of Amhara Associations in North America, FANA for short. And this is a platform where organizations registered in the US come together, discuss activities, strategize together, and occasionally fundraise together. And that has been successful. Over the last 2 years, you might have come across the fundraiser that was ongoing for a long period of time under the name of Amhara Emergency Fund that raised millions of dollars and provided, humanitarian aid for displaced people, survivors of Amhara genocide, and survivors of rape by TPLF, OLA, and Prosperity Party forces, and also supported some of the efforts of the media organizations in different ways. So that initiative is still ongoing, and AAA is a strong proponent of bringing new leadership, bringing new faces, encouraging people to come to the front. And within that notion, also the first president of FANA was our chairman, Theodore Stripe, now a gentleman from Amhara Heritage Society of Minnesota, Yezalam, by the name Yezalam, is the chairperson of Amhara Association, the FANA, the Federation of Amharas in North America. And we see similar trends of forming federations in other continents. In Europe recently, the Amhara organization is there, established a federation. In New Zealand, there has been a federation for quite some time now. In Australia, the same. In Canada, there is CASA, Canadian Amhara Associations Alliance. So the CASA has been also around for some time. And there is also an organization called Amhara Movement, International Amhara Movement, or IAM globally, which is composed of individual associations, but at the same time federations that are coming together to kind of discuss and chart a path. Obviously, bringing this diverse, multi-generational, multi-continental group of people is not easy. And I think a number of these coordinating platforms are struggling in terms of being efficient and effective. But I think given that, they're few months old, this is not only the right direction, but I think have proven to be useful if you look at in terms of how much money has been mobilized across the diaspora and how much support the movement back home has received from the diaspora over the last few years. Look, the Amhara movement it's unique in a sense. If you have seen other organizations, other movements within Ethiopia, they had sponsored third parties, external actors, for their own variety of reasons, were financing and providing support. The Amhara movement it's a movement that is financed and led by the movement themselves, Amhara themselves. We don't have a patron state, an external state that is trying to use the movement to undermine the nation state, as has been the case in other movements. This is a movement by the movement this is a movement of Amharas for Amharas themselves, by their own money and organizational capacity. So if we take that into consideration, I think the movement has been successful in terms of achieving quite accomplishments, good accomplishments over the last few years. The potential is not realized. I think there are missed opportunities, missed moments and potentials that are not tapped yet into. But I think I am very happy with the overall score of the movement.
Thank you. So yeah, since it is a work in progress, we will see how it unfolds. But let me bring you back to your association. When I say your association, I mean AAA's relationship with the Fano movement. I know that it is a civil society. You are primarily concerned with advocacy workers, recording the violations against the Amhara people everywhere in Ethiopia, sometimes providing humanitarian aids, and also engaged in diplomacy and advocacy, among others. That is what you have provided in your homepage. But do you have any relationship with the Fano movement? I am referring to an armed group which is fighting the Ethiopian government.
Well, I think we have to qualify what sort of relationship we're talking about. Obviously, we stand for Amhara people, and we believe the funds stand for Amhara people. We have common agenda in the sense of like ending the Amhara genocide, ensuring the voice of Amharas is heard, and Amharas reclaim their rightful place within the Ethiopian state. And as part of that, we have a number of activities that we coordinate with, one of them being the issue of human rights violations, but also the issue of humanitarian aid, with Fano's control much of Amhara region, as we said earlier, and we are invested in getting ensuring Amharas get appropriate humanitarian aid, and that's an agenda we speak with the Fanos to make sure they have access. They are allowing access by humanitarian organizations and a number of human rights organizations and also humanitarian organizations do come to us to kind of help them be connected to the Fanos for the objective of like ensuring humanitarian aid reaches Amhara people. We also, are supportive of the Fanos speaking for themselves. We don't represent them, nor we are, an element of an armed group. We are a civic organization. We are pro-human rights organization. But at the same time, we understand that, there is a lack of information and heavy, desire to learn about the Fanos goal, what they want to achieve. And drawing on our connection with international media on a number of instances, we have organized briefings where the media can directly hear from the Fano leaders in terms of what they want to achieve, why they are fighting, and all that. So those kind of relationships we do have. We regularly talk to the Fanos on these agendas, and we also sometimes, ask the Fano groups to allow our investigators to go to certain areas to do investigations. So to the extent those are the kind of relationships we're talking about, yes, we do liaison with and coordinate with them. But ultimately, AAA is a civic organization registered within the United States of America, and we operate within that legal framework.
Mm-hmm. In a sense, apart from the common objectives that you coordinate about, and you can neither condone nor condemn the violence, right? Is that what you are saying?
Yeah, we don't, irrespective of the actor, we don't, condemn any sort of violence. So any sort of violation that comes from any group, we are willing to report, and we approach that way, and the Fanos are made clear of that. Which is why I think it's important. Look, ultimately, we want Triplet to be an institution that outlasts any organization, any of our leaders. We are here as a leader of this institution, and we want to make sure this institution outlasts us individually, but also any particular organization within Ethiopia. And we will only achieve that if we stick to principles and values that are anchors of civic organization, and we operate within that context. And our relationship with any actor is built on those values.
Fair enough. So let's move to one final question on diplomacy. Have you garnered adequate support from the international community when it comes to not advocacy but diplomacy? I'm referring to state-to-state relationship in terms of understanding the Amhara cause, the possibility of negotiated settlement, and so on and so forth. So has situation has been changing, or do you think that there is a lot of work, homework to be done?
I think the diplomacy side has been a little bit, a weakness for our movement. And the reason is it has to do with the national weakness. Because, in the diaspora, but also at the same time, more importantly, I think on the ground, I think the fact that, the FANOs are still operating in a decentralized manner has a little bit, I think, has created a situation where the full extent of opportunities that could have been created in the form of diplomacy have not been utilized. We do have diplomatic actors coming to us to Tripoli, for instance. We do engage with diplomatic community members on a regular basis. But I think it would have been much more forceful if that kind of relationship was taken up by the FANO forces themselves and kind of done through them. And in that sense, I think also over the last 1 year, we have seen significant centralization of the FANO structure. We haven't still, break that ceiling of coming up with unified single initial platform yet. I think for a number of diplomatic community members, that continues to be an issue. If the lack of a single diplomatic actor to go to seems to create doubt and anxiety in terms of reaching out and talking to the FANOs. This is not to say the FANOs are not talking to the diplomatic community. We know, media has reported that a number of powerful countries regularly liaison with the FANOs, but they have to do it, several times, one FANO group at a time. And I think that is limiting the gain we could have made. And we are pushing, to the extent we can, to pressure the FANO groups to form to collapse into one unified group. I think that, remember when we start this discussion, I said the only reason Abiy power is now not because of military might, but because of political advantages it has, not by its capacity, but by the weakness of other actors, one of them being FANOs, I think. And in that sense, the FANOs have to prioritize, becoming a formidable political force, and that can only happen if they come up under a single unified structure. It doesn't necessarily have to be one organization. I think it has to be one platform where all coordination involving the FANOs has to be done somewhere. So I think that has limited the gains in terms of diplomatic community. But also I think, I'm a realist when it comes to diplomacy. Ultimately, you have to ask what is the interest of these countries in terms of liaising with these different actors within Ethiopia. And unfortunately, what we have seen recently with the introduction of liberalized financial market in Ethiopia is, instead of caring for the violation of the human rights violations in Ethiopia, and the continuing suffering of the people, some diplomatic actors are taking advantage of the weakness of the nation state Ethiopia to advance their own strategic interest. If we go back, for a few decades, Ethiopia used to be known for pushing back against, imposition of policy ideas and, infringing of sovereignty, its policy sovereignty by actors such as IMF and World Bank. Now that the FANO has broken the economic backing of Abiy, there is an opportunity for these actors to pressure Abiy to accept, neoliberal ideas. And instead of, putting pressure on Abiy as a diplomatic actor, they actually turn it around and use the economy collapse because of the ongoing war in Amhara region to exploit the weakness of the region to accept, very, very harsh neoliberal policies that Ethiopia has been pushing back against for decades. So Abiy, knowing he has no economy to last unless there is bailout from international financial organizations, have agreed to that terms, and now we're seeing certain Western countries essentially trying to sponsor Abiy and its Oromo prosperity hegemony in exchange for having certain interests served from their point of view. So I think the diplomatic arena has become very complicated because, not surprisingly, the West is taking this moment that FANO struggle itself created as an opportunity for itself, rather than shaping the interest of the country for better.
So in the interest of time, let's move to the final point, which is the upcoming report. So let's talk about the upcoming report from your association, from the AAA. First of all, when will it be published, and how could our audience access it? So if you start with this information and then delve into the details of the report.
Yeah, thank you. So this report is a periodic report. It's a follow-up to our 6 months report. The 6 months report covered atrocities that are committed by within Amhara region since the declaration of the state of emergency. The upcoming report is going to cover the 1 year from August 2023 to August 2024, and will outline the variety of human rights violations primarily committed by Abiy regime forces, but also by TPLF and OLA and some local Amhara officials as well, where the bigger story is like thousands of Amharas have been massacred. A number of these massacres were committed through using drones. We documented, more than 80 drone attacks. 42 of them are classified as massacres because they involved 3 or more civilians being killed. But also, thousands of civilians are killed by regime forces. More than 10,000 Amharas are arrested in different parts of the country, and hundreds of Amhara women have been raped by the regime forces, but also, the continued denial of human rights, humanitarian aid for millions of Amharas in the region. The closure of services, as you have seen, a number of UN agencies have reported more than 5 million students are out of school in Amhara region. Human rights organizations such as HRW have published reports showing, how health institutions have been targeted and health professionals have been killed by regime forces. We also have seen a continued rhetoric calling for genocide. The higher officials calling for fighting of Amhara people, inviting other groups such as TPLF to partner in their war against Amharas. The continued, effort of some notorious individuals as Daniel Kubret for using genocidal rhetoric against Amharas. So the report will outline the different facets of this war crimes against humanity, and frankly, an extension of the Amhara genocide that has been going on, particularly in the Oromia region to Amhara region. And this report will be published next week, and it will be available in our website, and hopefully other media outlets will also be, discussing it.
So in what ways media platforms would cooperate in disseminating the upcoming report? If you have any message for the media platforms or organizations or entities or even individuals, this is your chance to voice your.
Yeah, definitely. I think media would play a key role in terms of telling the story of these people. Look, we will produce a report, but media has an impact in terms of cementing the tragedy, the level of tragedy in the minds of the people by telling the stories. The stories of families such as in Shoa, an entire family, a multi-generational family was massacred at the return from baptism of a new baby girl. A story of dozens of Amharas killed in Flota Salam as they were hanging out in a public space in the middle of the city. A story of doctors that were killed by a drone attack as they were returning from Dacia to Jalanta, carrying very valuable life-saving medicines that the regime has continued to limit access to. Story of several family members that were killed in their homes through heavy machine guns launched where they're sleeping. Those stories, I think, need to be told, and the media just definitely needs to play its role in terms of humanizing these people to make sure that these people did not remain status. These are individuals with their life histories, with family members, with these are mothers, fathers, doctors that have been treating other people and supporting other family members, and this story needs to be told because the report is good, but ultimately people need to realize the true extent of the tragedy by understanding the impact and the real story of these people. So we want the media to be partner in telling, not just citing the reporters, but telling the story of the people and humanize and memorialize the story of these people.
So finally, since ultimately we all wish to see the light at the end of the tunnel, do you see any possibility of negotiated settlement and some semblance of peace to prevail in the near future?
I hope there will be some quick settlement, but I'm not optimistic. I'm not naive. I understand the complexities, and I think it's unfortunate that we will be able to. We're going to see some more bloodshed because primarily the regime in Arat Kilo has shown it, time and again that it's willing to fight until the last breath of its officers. They're not concerned about civilian safety. It's not a secret that after all, the Prime Minister himself, when he was asked why he would plant trees a day after hundreds of Amharas are massacred in Tole, said that, at least their bodies will lie under the shadow of the trees. This is the kind of sick mentality that the folks in power have. I do not expect them to come to their senses. They don't have the moral ground. They don't have the common sense. They don't have the humility to accept defeat. They don't have the kind of humanity that many people would assume. And they have seen, they have shown us that by, starting one war after another. So unfortunately, I don't think the regime in power would be open to any sensible political settlement. And I think my hope is, those people who are by the side of the regime now will come to their senses and realize that it's only time that the guns turn around against them. This regime has essentially opened war against many groups and will continue to do so unless we come together collectively to push back against the normalization of genocidal wars in the country and push for new settlement in the country where, dignity, common sense, and win-win politics is brought back to the discourse of this country, and that different groups across aisles, across ethnic groups work together to chart a better future. So my hope, if at all, of political settlement comes from a collective pushback against this genocidal regime in Arakilo, because I've given up hope on them, and I've had little hope to begin with. I was one of the few people that were very critical of Abiy from the very beginning, but I think it's also fair to say that none of us have imagined the level of tragedy this guy would cause in the country, and I don't expect him to change any course. And I think it's up to us who are, outside the regime and fighting against the regime in multiple ways, be it advocacy or politically or on the ground, to be the big guys in the house and come to a form of resolution where we can make a better future for everyone. Otherwise, the status quo is unbearable, primarily for Amharas who are at the receiving end of genocidal war now, but frankly for everybody else in the country and in the region, in the Horn of Africa.
That sounds a bit bleak, but let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Hona, it's always great talking to you. Thanks for your update on the Amhara movement, the politics, advocacy, and diplomacy related to the Amhara struggle. I'm always grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And I wish you all the best, and bye-bye until next time.
Bye.
All right, that was from us today. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye for today. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to push the like and the share button. And for all of you who are joining us later, please provide your comments and feedbacks, and we are thankful for that. Have a great time, and this is it from us for today. Bye-bye.